Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the IdOMUSIC podcast, and our goal and our mission is to empower and educate musicians and artists worldwide. And on today's episode, we sat down with co-founder and CEO of The Gathering Spot, Ryan Wilson, discussing his focus on community, being a young Black entrepreneur, and counting both his wins and his losses. Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the IdOMUSIC podcast, and I'm sitting down with one of the co-founders and CEO of The Gathering Spot, Ryan Wilson. How you feeling?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us. It's always really tough to get our guests on because I know y'all are busy, like, being popping in, like, running businesses and stuff. So thank you.
I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so for those that don't know what The Gathering Spot is, just briefly tell them about this, like, cool, unique co-working space.
Yeah, so, I mean, at the core, we consider The Gathering Spot an invitation-only private membership club that has co-working, a full restaurant and bar, and event space. Really, at the core of the business, though, it's about community. So you'll see our youngest member is 24, our oldest member is 86.
Oh, wow.
The goal is trying to bring all of a city together.
Are you serious? 86
86, it's Ambassador Young.
Wow.
So you'll see creative Atlanta, you'll see entrepreneurial Atlanta, you'll see corporate Atlanta, all under the same roof, which is my favorite part about it.
So how did the idea come about to start a co-working space? Because honestly, you know, I kind of told you off the record how I heard about The Gathering Spot, and we'll get to that. But it's just unique like no other co-working space to me in Atlanta because of that community feel that you speak to. From politics to entertainment, you'll see, and it represents Atlanta really well, in my opinion. But how did the idea come about with you and your partner, TK?
Yeah, I mean, so it was kind of two things going on at the same time. So you rewind back to 2013, 2014. We just graduated from Georgetown Law, and I was in Georgetown's law school. And I started working with a lot of community orgs. And the main problem that would happen is that, you know, so I would need to have a meeting, and they would be like, okay, meet me at the Starbucks. Or like at that time, I was going to Chinatown Coffee in D.C. Like every day. But those spaces just weren't built for that sort of meeting.
Right.
So I would get that tap on your shoulder like, yo, bro, like your coffee's finished like 5 hours ago. Get up.
Yeah.
And I think the second thing, and honestly is more important to us now looking back on it, if you look at your college environment, right? What other place exists where if you want to meet somebody that's interested in sports or music or like drama or plays the flute, like those people live down the hall or like across campus, and then when you graduate, all that goes away.
Exactly.
So we started talking about that problem, and it was like, I mean, what places do adults go to where you can kind of meet a little bit of everybody and won't be? I mean, in my case, I was only hanging around lawyers, which was cool, I guess, but.
Right.
I wanted to be able to get back to knowing people who were creative, knowing people that were starting businesses.
Just have like that hub for anything.
Yeah, I mean that to me is what I right now can't tell you my college schedule semester by semester, right? And they're like certain professors that I remember, but really the experience was about people, right?
Exactly.
Like
those connections.
It's about being able to go to really any major city, and I I know people because I know folks from college.
Your network, right?
So, at the heart of The Gathering Spot, what we're trying to solve for is that. Like, how as an adult can you continue to be in community with people that are different from you, but that ultimately, whether it's for work or just socially, there's some sort of value add and, like, some sort of energy that you're able to capture. I mean,
it just seems like you two were somewhat ahead of the co-working space trend, or not even a trend, but it's just like there's a major need for like that social interaction in 2018 due to technology and so on and so forth, where we don't really have that. And then also there's a huge entrepreneurial spirit about like, just within, especially the millennial generation, but even, even older, like people are just like they have their own businesses. So it's important to have a space to retreat to. And it just seemed like you guys were already kind of ahead of that or on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, so if I look at co-working, right, as a trend, I think that you're going to continue to see spaces evolve. And for us, I want to cater to the whole person, not just
A part of their work.
yeah, just the work you. Because I mean, there's work you, but then there's social you, there's political you, there's
Work
sports
me
you.
is social me, but yes, I understand.
But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I go to we went to a bunch of country clubs and we went to a bunch of co-working spaces, and I think that they serve a really particular need. But for the vast majority of people, that mix is kind of what is who they actually are, right? So, I mean, if I look at our last 24 hours, we went from an after-hours brunch that started at 2 a.m., and then by 2 p.m., we were having a meeting with Stacey Abrams, who's running for governor.
Right.
That, to me, is that duality is what's special about the space. And representative, what's crazy is that the same people were at both events. Yeah, I mean, co-working doesn't really capture all of what we're trying to accomplish. So,
there's more to it than that, for sure.
The gathering spot is about community. That's it. I mean, how do you put people together, get them into shared space, and then challenge them with a series of events and experiences that allow them to just meet new people or connect with people that they already know.
Right. So, Ryan, you're from here, and I want to ask you, because like I told you off the record, when we were talking before, it's really hard to come across people that are actually from this place, which has a certain type of culture already to it. Now, you could have gone, which I know you guys are opening, or it hasn't opened yet in DC.
It's on the way.
It's on the way. So I know your second location is DC, but why not start it there first? What was so important about bringing this unique space to Atlanta? And just describe the culture in your words. What does Atlanta represent for you?
I mean, I think Atlanta is the only city that two guys that are 24 need to raise $3 million can do that and then be supported by a community that, I mean, surrounded us and helped us to be successful. When I look at the city broadly, though, I mean, what other place could you go to where you have some of the biggest companies in the world? You have the Coca-Colas and the Home Depots that have been here for forever and are all over the world. And then you have some of the latest and greatest tech companies, really, I mean, just like businesses that are being born, new companies being born out of the city. And then you have spaces like this, right, that have been for all forms of content, but I mean primarily music and then now film that are being born and shot here too, right? I mean, so when we looked at across the country, I can't find another place, and then I certainly couldn't find a place that's black.
Exactly.
Right? And I'm still black, but I was 24 and black when we started this process. I couldn't imagine being anywhere else, and it won't ever leave Atlanta. I mean, the plan is to expand the club to other cities, but Atlanta, it will always be home. I'll always be Atlanta-based, and then on a plane going somewhere else. This city's special.
Did you imagine the gathering spot to be where it is today 3 years ago?
No, I mean, we've been blessed. I mean, it's really humbling when you look back and you're like, wow, we had this idea in my apartment in D.C., and today the things that we were talking about we're starting to watch them happen.
Right.
And so no, I mean, I'm more grateful than anything, and really excited about what we have planned coming up, because I think that getting over the first hurdle is a lot of times that's where they try to take your heart.
Exactly.
And so we've got confidence and a beautiful community of people that are working with us now.
Absolutely. So you all raised $3 million in 2 years, roughly 2 years, and I just must say that that's just quite impressive to me. People were and are invested in the gathering spot. So my question for you is how did you begin to brand this concept? How did you begin to convince people that this was a good thing and that it should be something that they invest in?
So a big mistake that I see that a lot of entrepreneurs make, and then honestly we made early, there's a fundamental difference between an idea and a business model.
Exactly.
Ideas are super cheap. Everybody, we could sit here and come up with an idea. And for a minute, the gathering spot was an idea. And I would go into the room and I talk about this like, oh, we're gonna have a space, it's gonna have all these people, it's gonna be so dope. And investors would look at me and be like, cool,
Okay.
bet. But then what we started to figure out was it's a very, very sober analysis that people are doing. How are you going to give me my money back plus some?
Exactly.
Making that transition, that's when I think we became entrepreneurs, because before then we were just like two dudes that had a concept. Getting to the point where you can raise that sort of capital requires you really being able to show a business model and to show folks how you're going to be able to grow and give them their cash back. It's really not any more to it than that. It took me a year to figure it out, but once we got it, it started to open some doors.
So when you talk about developing a business model, what does that mean?
So I mean, at a really basic sense, a business has to care for its expenses. And I think that we're in a weird time where there are mad businesses that don't, right? And I mean, like, look, when a business is getting started out, not all the time, are you able to cover all the expenses that you have from day one.
Right.
But you should have a plan to do so, right? And there are too many companies now that are being started where it's like, oh, no, we have mad users. It's like, okay.
Right.
Until you figure out how to convert those users to money,
right,
you'll never be able to get out of the cycle of just raising a round to continue to raise another round. So, I mean, it's looking at what do I need to survive? Almost the same way that you kind of look at yourself. What do I need to survive? And what do I need to do to make that amount of money to care for myself? That's how I look at the business day to day, and that's how we were looking at it back then.
So, I mean, being young entrepreneurs, 24 years old, just coming out of school, like, how did you figure it out? Like, some have mentors, others maybe Google it, I guess, trial and error. Outside looking in, it seems like you all had some sort of strategy. And now just talking to you, I realized that you said there were some mistakes, of course, early on that you made, but, like, what was the plan? How did you figure it out? Were there people you talked to?
I talked to a ton of different people. I mean, we pitched the business 97 times before we had our first maybe yes.
Wow.
And the way that we got to that number was not because we knew 97 people. What I would do is, like, we would meet someone and they'd be like, nah, I'm not interested. And then I would say, cool, like, is there anybody else that you recommend that we should talk to? And then from that, we started building a network of other people to go and pitch the concept to. So
Smart.
Even when a person wasn't willing to invest, being an entrepreneur, particularly when you're raising capital, it's like running towards a brick wall. And, like, you very clearly know that the wall is there, but you still are sprinting towards it, knowing that, like, at some point, that wall is just going to, like, back up a little bit and you'll have a little bit more runway.
True.
But when we would pitch people, we'd be like, look, I fully think that we can do this. Here's the business model. Cool, you're out. Who else should I rap with? And 9 times out of 10, they'd be like, oh, we'll talk to my guy, this. They like real estate. They like this. They like that. And we just kept going that way.
That's dope. That's dope. I like the analogy, the brick wall.
It's rough.
It's
I
rough.
mean, you're building a plane and flying is another analogy that I've heard, and it's true. Like, you don't have all the answers, but you really are, like, steering
Stressing it
this
out,
thing,
yeah.
like, at the same time, like, trying to glue stuff over here. And, like, it's a tough process, but you have to be a little bit crazy in the sense that, kid you not, I was working at a law firm here, and it was July 8th. People fact check me on this. July 8th, 2014.
Okay.
Sitting at a law firm, and Jay-Z was answering questions on Twitter about different things, and, like, it was around the time the album came out. And he wrote in 2013. He wrote. Someone asked him the question. Rather, they were like, "What's the biggest piece of entrepreneurial advice that you have?" And he said, "Don't listen to anyone. Everyone's afraid." And I remember, like, reading that in my office, being like, "Whoa," because that really is what the process is like. I mean, at a certain point, you've got to be listening to folks and getting feedback.
Of course.
But at another point, you're like, "Nah, I can't." Like, if something is actually disruptive, people shouldn't get it.
Exactly.
And if they do too easily, you should re-examine what your concept is. So the fact that folks weren't understanding what we were talking about
You knew you were onto something.
Yeah, we knew we had something to work with, and right, and reading that tweet where he's like, don't listen to them, they're afraid. I was like, oh, bet, okay, we got to just keep going, and eventually the market will catch up to what we're thinking about.
That's dope.
Or we'll fail. Either way, we did it the way that we wanted to do it, right. Which is, you only get one life.
I'm happy you didn't fail. You know what I mean? I'm happy that you're still going. So I think one thing that, when we're talking about young entrepreneurs or just people with businesses, you have to identify who your consumer is. So early on, who did you imagine your consumer to be?
So you'll see early articles that were like Gathering Spot, Private Millennial Country Club, and they would use millennial all the time, and it would be like super annoying to me because that was really the only way that people could understand it at the time. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't how we were positioning it in our mind. So at a certain point, though, we were like, okay, look, if people see this as a millennial thing, maybe we might have to just go with it. But as we started to do the club every day and really stay like true to what the original vision was, we saw that it wasn't just a millennial concept. You needed people who were getting started out and veterans in the same space in order to make our thing work. And so we transitioned past that. But for sure, it was a millennial country club or co-working space. Yeah. And, that was...
And it's evolved.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't representative of what we wanted to be. I mean, at the same point, you had other people that would be like, yeah, I mean, it's a country club. And we don't use country club or city club to this day because that makes you think of like spots with the old wooden walls and like your grandma's carpet. Mm-hmm. And that's just not our vibe. Mm-hmm. I mean, we think that like it's okay to be professional and social in the same space and like have meetings at 2 p.m. and 2 a.m. Like we get that. Mm-hmm. But when people were first trying to understand the idea, they just would. I mean, you need to put stuff in boxes, and so the box we got put in a lot of times was like the country club, millennial country club sort of thing.
Interesting. So you two, you and TK, met at Georgetown, and obviously both have you're educated, you both have college degrees and beyond. But his background's in finance and your background's in law. So how would you say, because I really wanted to know or really wanted to ask TK in terms of like the finance and like numbers, because obviously that's a big portion of this too. But then like how would you say you two work together in terms of like the business? Because I mean, if he's a numbers guy, you have this law background, how are you utilizing your like college education to really push you forward? If you are.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably using it a little bit more directly than what I am, right? And so, I mean, Teek and I are definitely friends. I mean, family at this point. I mean, we were roommates in college. Okay. But beyond that, right, the reason why we work together as business partners is not because we were friends. I think that's like a huge mistake when people are like, oh, I'm just going to like start this business with my homie.
I'm happy you said that because that was my question. Like, how do you determine whether this is somebody you can work with?
I mean, we knew that we could deal with one another because we had lived with one, like we been roommates for a minute.
Right.
But I mean, it was really a skill set match. I mean, when we're going back to that idea of trying to transition out of the idea phase, the business model phase is really about numbers, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's about trying to speak to fundamental assumptions about what the business, like how the business is going to survive. And I needed someone at the time that like for sure could do that work. And I didn't have that skill set at all. I mean, I basically made it out of college without taking a real math class. So
I feel you, same.
I completely was not able to build the models that he could. And so, I mean, the double whammy of finance and accounting really equipped the business well to come into conversations and him be able to field, I mean, to this day, field finance questions like no problem.
Right.
And my responsibility is more of working on the marketing, the branding, business development, partnerships. I do a lot more of the like growth stuff, and his responsibility is to try to make sure that
It makes sense.
it all can get funded,
Exactly.
right? So there's nothing to this day that I do that he doesn't check.
Smart. So let me ask you how you measure success.
So it's two ways. I mean, to my investors, it's a very quantitative analysis that happens. I mean, they're in this because it's my responsibility to drive certain performance metrics in the business and to get them a return on their investment.
Right.
So that's on one hand. On the other hand, and you'll see the club engage a whole bunch of political and social issues, but we didn't want to create another stuffy country club. So for us, I mean, it takes shape in a lot of different ways, but the club is a community space in a certain way, right? So I mentioned yesterday we're meeting with future governor
Stacey. Yeah, come on, we were claiming
Stacey Abrams, because we wanted to make sure that she had a great tie to the creative community in town. Every day at the club, we feed a school that's not too far away from us dinner, every single day. Anything that, I mean, we're doing a conversation tonight about if we're going to watch this upcoming NFL season or not, and will we show it in the club? So for us, it's political and social space as much as it is, trying to drive performance metrics. What impact can we have on the community in a real way? And I think maybe a third way that I pay attention to is just watching the relationships and connections that happen in the club. I mean, there's nothing more exciting to me than watching people who be like, yeah, I sat with a member a couple weeks ago. And he told me that he had 8 active deals through members of the club.
Wow.
And he's building a company, and his developer, his marketing company, his lawyer, his accountant were all people. He built that entire network inside of the club,
dope.
Which for me is amazing to
that's more
to hear.
Satisfying than you say the numbers are.
Yeah, I mean, you can I have the belief that if I chase trying to make sure that people are taken care of and that we're creating experiences that people enjoy, that the money will follow, right?
Yeah.
If you do it the other way around, I'm not so sure. But for us, it's let's just take care of our people, and if we do that, I mean, and so far so good, we'll be able to care for ourselves and we'll be in a position to grow.
So the thing about the happy hour, or I shouldn't say happy hour element, but the social element with the corporate element to this gathering spot, do you think you picked up on a lot of that being in DC? Because, I mean, I picked up on, going to happy hour pretty much every single day, but also going to class during undergrad, just being in school there. It's like I told you before, my friend tells me, hey, yo, Drake is DJing late night at the gathering spot. I'm like, why the hell am I not there? You know what I mean? And then on the other hand, I had an interview or a meeting with the business there. So it's just this double entendre. You just have two things that you can accomplish, and you, like you said early on in the interview, you're really speaking to all of the person and not just that one aspect being business.
Yeah, I mean, who wrote these rules that the professional you has to go to this space and social you has to go over there? Who? That's a rule that we don't follow. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, what's wrong with exploring all of who you are inside of a space? There's research to back this up, but most business deals are made socially. Mm-hmm. That's a super old school way of doing business, is to meet people at restaurants and bars. I mean, our generation, I think, has taken it, or we've kind of been told in a lot of ways that no, it's on Facebook, it's on LinkedIn, submit your resume to this website and they'll get back to you. But that's not actually how people get jobs. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's still relationship based. Absolutely. Through and through. And so what better way to meet people for business than to be in social settings where you can connect with them organically. So that's the whole philosophy that we have going into the club. It's not about trying to be, and look, I don't know. If you spend time in DC, I will give this to the district. It's probably the best happy hour city in the country.
And brunch.
But no, I mean, for us, it's like, yeah, let's get some work done by having people come together where there's not pressure surrounded by it, or where you're not coming into a room with a stack of business cards and just handing them out as fast as you can.
Exactly.
Nothing. I don't know about y'all, but like that never has worked for me.
Right.
Going into a room, just be like, hey, I'm Ryan. Hey, I'm Ryan. Hey, I'm Ryan over here.
Right.
You end up getting a bunch of cold call emails, but because you don't know the person and there was no context for why you met them,
you don't have anything productive to say.
You leave. So, no, I mean, business is social to us.
I agree. So people always talk about their wins, and like you see the finished product. Like, okay, we have this amazing facility, this amazing building where all this networking is going on, all these relationships are being, nourished and fostered. But how did we get there? I'm super interested in the struggle, basically, and because I'm there in my journey, I would say, and I'm sure a lot of people that watch this podcast are there, and they're like, how do I keep going? How can I do this on my own? So tell me about the period of time, and you can still be going through the struggle, but like tell me about that period of time, and especially with opening a second business in a different city. What are some of the struggles, and how did you move past that?
I mean, still struggle all the time. And to a certain extent, I mean, I think that's the entrepreneur's eternal, that's going to be like the crisis that never ends. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, if there's some things that we've overcome, and if there's a lesson that I've kind of tried to hold on to, I'm a big wins and losses sort of person. That's how I view life. Like, that happened, that was awesome, that's a win, that was a loss. What I've tried to do throughout this process, though, is to stay extremely flat. So when a win happens, I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
When a loss happens, I'm like, cool. and that process has really kept me really balanced, right? Because I don't get too hype and I don't get too sad. I mean, and there's no destination that I'm running towards. So like, even people ask me, questions about like, well, what is it like to be, for the gathering spot to be successful? I'm like, what are you talking about? In my head, I'm in it's a never ending. I mean, I'm in the like a race that I don't know where the finish line is, but I'm not anywhere near it right now. So for now, we're just gonna keep it pretty steady and flat. But I mean, the struggles. I mean, immense struggles. I mean, I think and to be totally transparent, one of the main things that we haven't talked enough about, I don't want to go on too long of a rant with this, but
feel free.
It was frustrating for me when we were going through this process, and I would meet older people that I considered to be successful, and it was almost like they had amnesia about the process at all.
Right.
I'd be like, well, how did you do it? And like they would look at me like, oh, you want me to do the work for you? And I was like,
no,
I'm not. I want to know if the door is over there or if it's over there.
Exactly.
I'll walk through the door myself. Just like, where is the door? Just tell me, like, generally northwest, east. Yeah, just like go which direction. So TK and I promised ourselves that if we ever were in any sort of position to talk about anything that we had overcome, that we would just be honest about it. Fundamentally, we did raise $3 million. What folks don't know though is that we spent that $3 million instantly. So you hear people talk about like what's your burn rate in the startup world, which is really like, how much you've raised a certain amount of cash, how much are you spending per month, and like basically when you're gonna run out of money.
Money, right?
Well, we ran out of money like day zero because all the cash that we raised went directly into the building, and so we opened our doors in March of 2016. When we opened, it was like we've got to start there. We've got to build a membership community fast. We've got to start selling some events. We got to sell some food like right now. It wasn't. I mean,
there was no time.
No, there was no like situation where it was like, oh yeah, I mean, we're good for 6 months on rent, and we can pay our payroll for forever. It was like
go time.
We got to go, right? So I've never left that mode, and really don't want to a certain extent, because it's that grind that taught us the fundamentals of the business. And now, you want to talk about being able to stretch resources? I mean, back in the day, like I used to call TK on Mondays and be like, "Yo, what do we need to do this week?" He's the finance person, and some of the numbers that he would say back to me used to be crazy, right? It used to be just like, what?
You're right.
But going through that challenge now has us where we understand. I mean, the 60% of, you just look at co-working spaces, 60% of co-working spaces are unprofitable. We started to become profitable in our third month of business.
Wow. I was going to ask, that was my next question. Like, when did you see profit?
So, and profit in the startup world is interesting because what you're doing is really trying to you get into what they call like a liquidity event, right? So it's not all of the money that you make is reinvested in the business, and for us, that's for sure what we're doing. But in our third month, that's when we had to stop losing money, because it wasn't like if we didn't, that we had a whole bag of cash around the corner,
right,
that we would be able to
right,
throw in the business. And
right.
So extremely stressful period of my life, like crazy stress. But again, I don't regret it for anything, because it taught us what we needed to do to become a real and legitimate business. Had we not gone through that, I think we would have been like a lot of startups where you get some cash in, you spend it, and then it's not your money, and you're like, oops, I lost. I'm going to go off to my next venture. For us, we raised money from family offices, so the cash that we had in the business was extremely personal to us. It felt like my money. And two, I wasn't going to go out like that. So we kept, every day just doing whatever possible to survive. So anybody that's going through that, you have to become like a good entrepreneur, my belief, you have to go through that like really intense period where the process to a certain extent is like designed to break you. Like it's to get to the other side of it, like you gotta have the heart, you gotta have that dog in you to make it to the other side. And it's meant to get people who are just like, oh, I'm not for this, I can't do it.
Right.
It's designed to get those people out of the game.
Yeah.
To a large extent. Venture kind of messes it up a little bit, but for the most part, if you're not gonna keep running at that brick wall, despite like knowing that you might go splat real soon, you probably shouldn't do this.
Would you say that the risk is greater than the reward, or the reward is greater than the risk?
That's tough. I guess the risk is greater than the reward. You only get to do life once, right? And that sounds cliche, but
it's true.
At the end of the day, it's like it only happens one time. And for me, I'd rather go out trying than
to not.
Yeah, like the safe route. I could go practice law right now, and have a lot of friends that do. That wasn't for me the day-to-day thing that was going to give me enjoyment. And so I'd rather risk it and at least be able to look you in the face and be like, look, it was terrible. I failed. It terrible. Like, it was awful, but I tried. Right. And in that period of, if you look back a decade ago and think about the challenges we were experiencing at that point, I was a high school student.
Yeah.
Right. And in that time, it was like about my SAT score and if I was going to be able to, like, so, life.
It's always another challenge.
Yeah, there's another challenge and another era of your life that's going to come, and you'll look back on whatever time period and be like, man, I can't believe I was tripping over I can't even remember my SAT score right now. I honest to God. So
it's not even important at this point. It's just
it wasn't important
it really
3 years after. And it was like at one point in my life the most stressing thing. I was most stressed about that over anything else. So
right. So it seems to be a bit of exclusivity and mystique around the gathering spot, which is intended because it's a membership private space. Kind of like if you know, Like I told you, my first experience was when my friend told me about well, that really wasn't the first time I heard of the gathering spot. I've seen it. Seen it around. Is that intentional? It is membership based. So aside from the community feel, does that play into the brand? Like what you might think people are more intrigued by the fact that it is exclusive?
Yeah, I mean the club is exclusive, but we're not doing it as purely like a marketing or branding thing.
Mm-hmm.
For us, exclusivity is really about curating the right community. So we go through that process intentionally to make sure that we know who's there, right? So like the only way to do that is to be selective about who's in the club each day.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I'm really proud of just when I step back and look at the mix. I mean, about a third of it's creative, a third of it's in the corporate community, a third of it's entrepreneurial. 60% of the club are women, which is important to me because, I mean, which women haven't been overrepresented in private, whatever, country clubs, city clubs, even co-working spaces
Right.
to a certain extent.
Right.
I mean, 65% of the club is black. Super important too. Haven't been overrepresented in these sort of spaces at all. So, I mean, it is exclusive, but the litmus test, the thing that we ask questions about, it's not so much like what's your job and how much money do you make or any proxy to get to that information. It's questions like what animates you outside of the office. We care far more about the answer to that question than I care about like what your job title is.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, exclusive, but exclusive with a different set of criteria around why we are selecting people. So it's not, I mean, I don't know. I look at most country clubs and the spaces are basically filled with executives from different corporations, but basically on the same level, which makes sense for, that's a different context. But for us, it's like, that's cool information or whatever, but like, what do you like? Like, who are you? And that allows us to be better programmers. The community's more dynamic at that point. And then it gets to the point where, like that member that I was talking about that has 8 deals working in the club, he can do that because there's that many different types of people in the space.
Exactly. And I mean, I also think it's interesting that you do try to cater to, the younger community, knowing that, like, you have the program for, what is it, like, if you're under 30, it's like $100 a month or something.
Yeah, so it's literally half. Yeah, I mean, I'm 28, and all of my friends, look, I mean, there's different stages of life, right? And so we do the best that we can to make sure that everybody can participate in this thing. You can't be a community and then know that there's things about your community that just certain people just can't afford to do, right?
Exactly.
And so formally, we have the under 30 program, but informally, right? If you're doing something dynamic in the city, I don't really care what space. I mean, we noticed a little bit earlier this year that we didn't have enough educators in the space, and went out and met with teachers and professors on all levels and recruited a group that could come into the club and represent that perspective inside of the space. And so
it's ironically, when I was there for the Power event, I did meet an educator who had just, I think, recently become a member. So congrats on bringing that.
No,
that
it's a real thing for us. You have to have everybody have a seat at the table, or at least have the opportunity to.
For sure. As you grow, what do you wish to bring to each location? Like, as each city will bring its own culture, obviously, when you open up the DC doors of the gathering spot, it's going to be a different vibe than the Atlanta, the home of Atlanta. But what does the gathering spot provide for each space? Like, you talked about the mission, you talked about the core, what you intend on doing, but like, what can you ensure to your members that it's going to be?
Yeah, I mean, any future club will be organic and authentic to whatever city that we're going to. At the same time, we're always going to stay true to where we started, which is what we've been talking about this whole time, about community, right? And so if you're looking for a networking club or one of those pass your business cards out sort of club, we're probably not a good fit for you, because gathering spot is one of those places where you kind of get out of it what you put into it, which is very similar to the college environment if you think about it. If you invested in that experience, then you probably came out on the other side of it with really cool relationships and experiences. But if you didn't, and you lived off campus and you didn't go to social events and you didn't hang out in the cafeteria, then you probably left that experience with not much, right?
Exactly.
So each city will have that same, that core value will be infused into every club that we open, where, look, we're gonna do the work of trying to make sure that it's curated in a way that will benefit you, but then, that city will kind of create its own customs and ways that it moves that'll be different than Atlanta.
So will members here be able to go to a club in a different city? How does that work?
Yeah, so the plan is, and that's particularly looking at the creative community here, they're always on the road in different markets. And so for sure, as a member here, you'll be able to access any other club that we open with the goal of making sure that when you're in,
You
I
have
don't really
some
care,
place.
and you name the city, that you have a place that you can still have meetings and dine and attend events.
So I guess for me, my question for you is, why community for you? Because that's the thing that we keep talking about. We keep going back to. Tell me how. Yeah, I know you were involved in college and different things like that. But even as far back as you can remember, your upbringing, how did you become value community so much? Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I'd say there are probably two larger influences that have been guiding both of us for a minute. The first is that my parents are entrepreneurs, and they started a call center business in 2001. I remember the first 2 employees that were in our basement.
Wow.
That business went from those 2 employees to 5,000 employees over the course of 10 years.
That's crazy.
And so, and if you know anything about the call center world, turnover is crazy. Spaces look terrible.
Mm-hmm.
The companies aren't known to really care about their employees. And my parents went the exact opposite direction, and really built a family. And the spaces were dope. There were meditation rooms. There was childcare. There was, any sort of service that you needed was there. And my dad would go to every single training class, and he would say, "I want this to be the best job that you've ever had," and then would work tirelessly to try to make sure that he lived up to that standard. But the business worked, and their attrition was low, and all that because a community had formed. And then when I went to Georgetown, I went to a predominantly white institution, and the central thing that I worked on were diversity initiatives, really challenging the university and my fellow students to think about, look, a lot of times when we say diversity, we don't actually mean diversity. We're not talking about an equal exchange between 2 people. We're really talking about where I don't see enough of this group. Not that I want to talk to that group per se,
Just
but
represent it.
yeah, as long as they're over there around the corner, on the side, then we're diverse.
Right.
So I spent most of my time at Georgetown working on that issue, and I don't know, it taught me the value of being able to genuinely say, look, I've connected with people that I would not have met genuinely, and there was a real relationship that was born there. That wasn't the we got 15% over here and 30% over there and 20% over there.
Right.
And at the same time, realizing it's okay to have spaces in my context that are black. I'm black. I like black people. We do things that are from that point of view. That doesn't mean that anyone is excluded to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there's a point of view that we're coming to this conversation with, and I'm okay with you knowing what that point of view is. In my case, I'm 28 black. I like hip hop, and that's it's kind of the perspective that we're going to bring to the table for most things.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that any other business that you go to, they have a point of view and a target customer in a way that they're kind of thinking about how to talk to that customer. We a lot of times talk about those spaces as being neutral,
mm-hmm.
but they're not neutral, right? If you go to a country club in the South, country clubs in the South for the vast majority of their history have been built for white men. Mm-hmm. And there's no way to like feel that we shouldn't feel anything about that. That's the perspective that those spaces have always been built for traditionally.
Cater to, yeah.
Once you acknowledge that, then you're able to start to do some real work beyond it. But like if you don't, and we're like, well, no, everybody's welcome. This is neutral space. It's not neutral. Like you can't actually move towards neutrality if you're like convincing yourself
that is otherwise.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, like it doesn't make sense. So, we're really like dialed into exactly what point of view we're coming from. Again, if that's interesting to you, right? I mean, and hip hop is super fascinating to me because it's what other genre of music is just celebrated across the world. If you go to a concert, it doesn't really matter whose concert at this point. A little bit of everybody is there. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the perspective that we have. I mean, that's where we come from, and we think that if you talk about values and meeting people and community and genuinely live those things out, then people will come and join you.
I have to circle back to Atlanta being Atlanta. And how you will see a T.I. having a conversation with maybe moderating a panel or something with the Stacey Abrams, our future governor.
It's coming.
But it's coming. See, you guys have already had that perspective of, really embracing all of what Atlanta has to offer. But especially with the entertainment space, just showing how dynamic some of these artists, some of these like influencers or whoever it is are with your programming. And I think that's been a good thing.
For me, it's one of the ways that Atlanta is always, I don't know a better way to say it, kind of disrespected. Like the content that literally the world is consuming is being produced in spaces like this. Mm-hmm. And then we act like we're like that isn't happening here. And we also act like, look, these folks that are doing it, they're not just rappers. Like, their businesses, and you really have to look at it that way. Like, their businesses are as dynamic as any company that's being started in the city or anywhere that you're going to find across the country. Mm-hmm. And we have to acknowledge that. Like, look at a person like Tip. To be in the music world for as long as he's been as an accomplishment. But Tip is in a bunch of different things that folks don't understand. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a recent piece talking about his perspective on real estate in the West Side. Mm-hmm. There's a real business behind and business acumen behind him and his team and like a lot of the people in the city. And so through our programming, we try to like acknowledge and really, I mean, give respect to that sort of effort over time. That, I mean, it is hard to, if you look at each artist as a business, it is hard to be in business for a decade, mm-hmm. for 2 decades. That's super difficult. Mm-hmm. And so the people here like are amazing. The fact that they've been able to do that, and they're the brand, right? Like mm-hmm. it's about them showing up at work every day. Mm-hmm. Which keeps the whole thing going. So
that's dope.
Yeah, we'll keep doing it.
So talk to me, being the marketing, branding, the guy who's really pushing the gathering spot. Talk to me about how you approach that. Like, what are some of your keys to branding the gathering spot? That's the question.
We try to be transparent. We try to talk to people honestly about what it is that we're thinking and engage them where they are. I mean,
what are some of the things that have worked, like in terms of figuring that out? Because I'm sure things have changed from the beginning. 2016 you guys opened the doors to 2018. It's 2 years, which is also another thing that you guys have seen dynamic growth. How many members did you start with, and how many members do you have now?
So we
obviously 0. But
yeah, I mean the first cohort of members was like 100, mm-hmm. and there's like a little north of 1,500 that are there now.
That's beautiful.
I mean, we've hosted, last count, like 3,500 events. I mean, we've hosted more events than days that we've been open, which is for sure a blessing. But I don't know. I mean, it feels like, it's been 2 and whatever years. It feels like way longer than that. And what folks don't realize is that for me, I'm not just counting the 2 years of operations. Like, that's great.
All the development.
But it was 2 years plus of development too. So I've been doing this now 4.5, almost 5 years. Which, you know, it's a long road.
It's a never-ending road.
Yeah, it's completely never-ending, right? And if you don't have the passion to get up every day and to do the thing that you're working on, like, at full intensity every single day, then, like, don't do that thing, right? Like, it's probably not the idea that you should try to develop, because there are going to be times where it's like, and I've had these regularly. It's like, what am I? This is crazy. Like, I could just get a job, be passionate about that job, and not worry about all of the stuff that comes with being an entrepreneur. And I think we, like, entrepreneurs, need to be honest about that process. We glorify some entrepreneurs to an extent where we make it seem like, you know, we romanticize it in a way. Like, it's parts of it are beautiful, but parts of it are terrible, right? Like, making a payroll is what, there are real responsibilities that come at this point. I mean, we have a team of like 60 people that work at the club. That is like the biggest responsibility that I have day to day.
Yeah.
I have to make sure, and there are families that now depend on this organization collectively existing and being able to, you know, provide for them. And so, if you're not in tune with that sort of stuff, and I know I'm supposed to be talking about marketing and branding.
No, it's fine. This is good.
But to me, like, these are the things, these values are the things that I try to put in the marketing. Like, when we're talking about the club, that is the marketing or branding. Like, we don't do traditional campaigns. Like, we don't have radio spots or, like, I mean, for us, it's a little bit of digital and word of mouth.
Yeah, very organic.
So the only way to have that actually translate across a market is to, I mean, really be in tune with why you do what you do every day, and to talk openly about that. I mean, and folks challenge us. Like, this whole, like, tonight, are we watching the NFL season or not, came about because a member asked me, yo, you putting the games on? And I was like, I think so. And he was like, word, that's crazy. I can't believe y'all would put the NFL on. And I was like, yeah. All right, let's do a discussion and figure out where everybody is on it.
Wow.
And so, like, the space is meant to be, and so that's not a marketing thing. Like, you know, are we watching the NFL?
Real.
That's just it's life for us.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. What's the latest book that you've read? Like, the last book you've read or listened to?
Last book. I'll be honest. When I started this process, I was reading a ton of books. Think and Go Rich. I was reading, like, all the classic entrepreneurial books, and they were somewhat helpful, but they also started to make me a little scared, because I would read the information and then I would try to mimic what was in the business book. And so the majority of things that I read now are more news. I'm like a furious consumer of, like, more of that type of content than I am in, like, the business leadership book. Because and this is just a me thing. There I mean, there's obviously a ton of great information to gain from those sort of resources, but the time period that I'm in right now is much more of a kind of a creative time. And so to do that properly in my mind, I've kind of got to be able to move through it naturally, rather than trying to, like, be like, well, in chapter 3, you know, on the 21st line, they said, you know, at 21 months of growth, you go right. And, like, I started to, I mean, and that might be the kind of legal thing in me too, where I was like, I read text and then it's about applying that text to some sort of set of facts. I'm trying to stay away from that right now. So I read a ton of news, and we actually produce a weekly, like a list of all of the articles that we read over the week that we thought were dope.
Oh.
That are all like a whole bunch, every business and culture and politics, whatever.
That's cool. So what advice, I mean, would you give to your 24-year-old self starting this? Or when did you get the idea? Whatever age you were that you and TK had this idea to do this spot, what would you give that young entrepreneur?
One thing that I used to tell myself, and I actually, I genuinely tell myself all the time, is that small ideas will like forever remain small. And so back then, the first quote for us to produce the business was $1 million. And I remember seeing that number and being like, oh, well, this is crazy. Might as well pack it in. Never going to happen. And then we fought for it, right? And then we kept kind of talking about the concept, and 1 became 2 million that we needed to raise. And then 2 became 3 million, right? And so what we were telling ourselves the whole time was like, look, we have to fight for the best version of this. If we settle for anything less than that, then it might not be successful either way, but the likelihood of success is probably heightened if we can't. We've got to keep trying to like be the best version of what we can be, and it's super easy when you're starting a business, and you hear people say this all the time. It's like, well, I needed to get out what I could at that point, and there are like practical constraints that make that true, but mentally you have to be always like, no, like I got to get to the bigger. I mean, even the room that we're in right now. I mean, as it was explained to me earlier, this board is world class. Mm-hmm. And I'm quite confident that there are boards probably a quarter of this size that could get the job done.
Right.
But the get the job done board isn't this board, and this board is what made this room, in part special. So you've got to go out and invest in and find and keep, not be afraid of being like, I mean, look, if I put this massive $1 million board in this space, no one will come here to record, and then I would have just invested $1 million, and I could have invested $100,000, and I wouldn't have been out of so much money. But like this board made the room, so I don't know. I think it's just a consistent principle across entrepreneurs that I study, that they make like these sort of decisions, and like are willing to bet on themselves and on their teams to a point where you can't settle for the lower, lesser version of what it is that you're doing. You gotta fight for like the big W. Like, Absolutely. What is it like to win a championship? Not, no, I'm just trying to have a team.
Get to the finals.
And and all that sounds cliche, right? I mean, it's like that's that kind of bumper sticker type talk, but like fundamentally, that's why I'm using the example of this board. Like that's actually how it plays out. You have to invest in yourself and believe in like the biggest possible version of your dream. And that doesn't get easier after you found some success, because now the question for me turns to, well, Atlanta's cool, just stay in Atlanta. Like, why go risk everything in DC? Mm-hmm. We're about to announce a third city. Why go risk it there too? Like, so what's the point? And I have to keep kind of talking to myself and TK about being like, no, like, look, this plan back when we used to dream about this thing was to make it like this. And so we got to keep fighting for that. Mm-hmm. And if we settle, that's a failure. So, I mean, getting comfortable at any stage in the process is death to us.
Did you ever, or do you ever get discouraged? Or first off, you mentioned that you studied certain entrepreneurs. What entrepreneurs do you study, or have you studied?
So this is another thing where, like, I think that people a lot of times are studying the Steve Jobs and the Bezos of the world, and like they're fantastic entrepreneurs that absolutely changed industries. We should pay attention to them, but the entrepreneurs that I pay attention to are a lot of the folks that are successful around me. It's the artists that we were just talking about. But it's coming to spaces like this and knowing that, like, wow, like in 1999, you made the investment into like this. Like, how did you? I pay attention to people who are closer around me, names that you probably like are not being written about all the time. Because a lot of the lessons and like being able to really get down into the weeds about like how did you do it. I mean, you could read Steve Jobs' biography and pick up some gems, but there's nothing like going to a local successful business person and being like, "Yo, how did you and why? Like, why did you do that then? Because you could have done that, and it would have been a whole nother and like going through that process." So I don't know. I'm not into. I think Amazon is an amazing, fascinating company because they come into industries that are adjacent to them all the time and are talking about like not believing in rules. Like they're rewriting. It was first send books. Now it was then we send you everything. Now we're gonna send you everything in 15 minutes and get your groceries and music and like I mean it's just fantastic. Like it's fascinating that they just are
no boundaries.
Yeah, no, like they're just growing crazy. But like most of the time for me, it's just like local folks that are grinding away that have built. I mean, businesses that have been places for 20 years. That's crazy.
Were you concerned that this was done before? Like, did you feel like, in terms of like music, for example, an artist is super oversaturated. There are thousands of artists, but yet there are many artists still in here, still booking time, still striving for their spot in this market. Same goes with being an entrepreneur or having some sort of, we realize is not just a co-working space, it's much more than that. But like, did you ever feel discouraged knowing that there were other?
No, I mean, not really. As an entrepreneur, there's a certain confidence that I think you have to have. Because I mean, like the world is going to tell you every day why your idea is terrible. I'm of the belief that, look, especially once you get the thing established, and this is why I talk openly about the club and our values and all that stuff, because you can't copy a moving target. So as long as I keep my feet moving, like whatever version that we're talking about or that you're going to try to copy today, that's not going to exist. By the time you create whatever it is that you're going to create, that version of the thing won't exist. So
go for it.
Go ahead. Like and like that, and that's not said, just trying to be arrogant. I just think that like as business owners, right? The only reason why we exist as a business is the industry that we're in didn't push to this like the space that we're in. And so if to sit around and worry about competition, that would be all consuming. I just need to focus on how do I get to our next milestone, and if it's truly different, then like you're not going to be able to copy like something that doesn't stop.
There's no imprint, right?
Yeah, so I mean, that's our goal. I mean, that's what our calendar doesn't repeat because I've seen events. I've literally seen the same event that we hosted be put on somewhere else. And it's like, okay, that's fine because we were never going to do that event again. So, we were inspired by the world, and here's
your dose of inspiration.
You can have that, and like my team is sitting somewhere right now trying to think of like what the new thing is going to be for us. So, I mean, I don't know. The competition for me, that's not a competition and failure are the two concepts that like I don't really stay that in tune with. Like I realize that like it's possible, and you kind of got to look over your shoulder a little bit, but if they're gonna get you, they're gonna get you. So you just keep moving forward.
So you're married. How do you manage to have balance with your marriage? Do you have children? No children yet, but eventually I'm sure you'll have family. Just like having the balance, because I feel like being an entrepreneur is pretty much 25/8. Yeah. So is there a balance, and how, if you do have some sort of balance?
I will admit that like I don't know if balance is my strongest skill set. But I think that, I mean, it's just about being accountable and picking times and staying true to what you said that you were going to do. I mean, it's a really simple approach for me. So, I mean, if we said, or I said, we were going to have dinner on Friday night, then I'm a dinner at Friday night. And I think it becomes a problem in relationships when you just, like, don't do the things that you said that you were going to do. That's most of the time when people are like, get frustrated with you. Mm-hmm. So I just try to, I mean, look, my wife understands, knows. We've been together, not married through this whole process, but been together through this whole process of starting a business. So she knows what that is. The only thing that like is required of me in this context is like, look, you say you're gonna go here at this time. Don't call me 5 minutes before and say I can't make it. Mm-hmm. Now at the same time, if the conversation is like, yo, I'm about to be in wherever city all week, cool, just tell me that too. But as long as the expectations are set and clear, like you can avoid most of the balanced
issues.
Yeah, like all that stuff kind of will take care of itself if you just communicate. So that's what I try to do. I mean, we'll be our 2-year anniversary is next week.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Happy anniversary. That's beautiful. I'm happy to see successful Black marriages. Okay.
Thanks.
So walking into this space, and I know that you had like a brief conversation with Curtis, who's the co-owner of this particular facility, and it's been around for 20 years, Black-owned business. Seeing this and just like being an entrepreneur yourself of a thriving business, how did that make you feel? What type of emotions when you see this place with these rooms, these lounges, this live space? You're just kind of like amazed. You talked about the soundboard. Like, what did that give you? What type of emotions? And does it give you hope for the Black entrepreneur?
I mean, the biggest emotion that I had was really gratitude, right? I don't think that a business like ours could exist without spaces like this existing before it, right? And, I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, right? Everything is some sort of remix of something else that's happened. Mm-hmm. But you have to acknowledge and really stay, for me, like in tune with people that were making investments and sacrifices into their businesses and into their communities before you were even born. So, I mean, for this business to be here 20 years, that's more than half my life.
Facts.
And so it's walking around the studio for me is more about, wow, thank you for being willing to do what you did here, because you made it possible for 2 20-something-year-old dudes from, I mean, in my case, from Atlanta, to come down and try our own venture, right? And because you didn't fail, right, and people saw that you as a success, we now have the opportunity to be viewed the same way. Mm-hmm. And then like that's a responsibility that I carry going forward. Absolutely. Where it's like I have to figure out how to make sure whatever the next wave of entrepreneurs behind me have the opportunity to do whatever they did. So you got to do business the right way and make sure that you're approaching stuff that, you know, people won't be like, oh yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, it was that gathering spot, but like those dudes were terrible and that business wasn't run right, and like we can't invest in anything like that again. Spaces like this, when done correctly, demonstrate that, you know, we should continue to, I mean, not just create stuff, but like own things that have an impact in our community. Mm-hmm. So as much as I am like floored by all of the records around that, I mean, this is the soundtrack to my life. Mm-hmm. It seemed like it was recorded here. Yeah. I'm more just grateful that the team here and teams, I'm sure over time, that did this and made this happen, did it so that we could be in the city.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Well, I really feel like you've pretty much answered all of my questions about entrepreneurship, and I think that it's amazing what you guys are doing at the Gathering Spot. And what you're doing, you know, just as a young Black entrepreneur, I think is incredible. And I'm sure you've heard that now that it's done. Like, everybody's like, wow, you did it, you know? So congrats on that, and congrats on your future venture. I hope to hear more about this third city.
Yeah, it's we're working on another one, and I thank you. I mean, genuinely, this is
No problem.
It's a really cool opportunity, and I think if it represents anything to me, we have to support one another, right? And so, if there's anything that the club, I mean, and at this point, I guess I'm talking to you and then anybody who's listening to this, that we can do to be supportive. That happens in other communities more than it happens in ours. At least visibly, and like in a way that's demonstrated. And one of the goals through this process is to disrupt that. So if there's any way that we can connect and
absolutely
particularly do business together, like,
we will. Don't you worry about it.
You can call me on my cell phone, like, for real. So.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I must say that next time that Drake is DJing, I need to be there.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
You just call me. You call me immediately. Okay.
I got you.
Thank you for making it possible
it.
for us young entrepreneurs. Before you take your headphones off, tell them where they can find you in The Gathering Spot on social media.
So you can find us on all platforms at The Gathering Spots, and our website is thegatheringspot.club, and I'm Spot on RW on every platform too.
Awesome. Thank you again, Ryan.
Thank you.
And as always, you guys can find this podcast at IDM Podcast on social media, as well as myself, Sammy Approved, on all social media platforms. Thank you again. Sonically superior.